night of HoShana Rabbah has been dedicated Lui Nishmat. First, my father-in-law, Mr. Karl Fryer, Yosef ben Eliezer, and then my mother-in-law's Cecilia Fryer's memory, and the thought of having this evening Liloi Nishmat Rabbi Ebner, so without any hesitation, so my wife Louisa said that we should definitely have the Leil Limud tonight, Liloi Nishmat Rabbi Ebner. It's very appropriate because there was a lot of mutual admiration between Rabbi Ebner and my in-laws. Mrs. Ebner, who unfortunately was unable to attend tonight when we told her at the Shiva, so she was very grateful for that, and we wish her from here a refresh Shlema. We hope to see her in the future. So tonight's learning, while tonight the program will be focused, of course, on Rabbi Ebner Zatzal, so the learning tonight will be an aliyah for all of their neshama. Also, coincidentally or not so coincidentally, I don't know, 15 years ago, Rabbi Ebner initiated a series of sichot in the yeshiva, which a few minutes after mincha every day, he would discuss one of the 48 Devarim Shatarah Nitinei for him, the Mishnah in Avot, in the sixth Mishnah, the sixth Perek, in which the Mishnah delineates 48 different attributes of a person in which she can be Komet Torah. One of those shirim, part of that shir actually, because I listened to it, it's on YU Torah, you can listen to it as well, stuck in my memory over the years. I would be lying to you if the 48 shir stuck in my memory, but this particular one stuck in my mind. It was the 10th attribute, Shimush Chachamim, and in that shir, they're focused on the Gemara in Brachot. That's Zion. Gemara says, "Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Reb Shimon ben Yochai, Gdola Shimusha Shel Torah Yoter Milimuda." So the service of Chacham is greater than the learning of Torah. Shene'amar Ho Elisha ben Shafat Asher Yatzak Mayim Al Yidei Eliyahu. So the Pasuk Melachim tells us how Elisha is referred to, Elisha the Navi is referred to as the one who poured water on the hands of Eliyahu. Lomad lo ne'amar. The Gemara, Reb Shimon bar Yochai explains the Pasuk doesn't tell us that Elisha's greatness stemmed from the fact that he learned with Eliyahu. Eliyatzak, Muramed Shegidola Shimusha Yoter Milimuda. So the Shimush, the service, and here the service is, I should just point out, something Rebecca did not mention. The Shimush is not the Shimush only of the Chacham, it is the Shimush, the Shimusha Shel Torah, namely that one understands that through the service of the Chacham, so one gains a different understanding and a different appreciation for the Torah itself. The way that Rav Ebner explained at the time was that the exposure to the Chacham on a regular, ongoing basis leaves an indelible mark and transforms what the Talmid himself can aspire to. And in that context, he mentioned two stories from his days learning with Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal. The first one actually was the story that I remember, but that's not the story I'm going to tell. The second story I'll get to in a few minutes. But in many ways, tonight, different people will speak and different people will talk about Rabbi Ebner's impact on them personally and on the yeshiva, and then in general, the world of Torah. So to my mind, there's a sort of a melding of the impact that he had on me personally with the impact that he had here, specifically in Eretz Tzvi. Halacha understands the notion of a Talmud Mufak, and it also understands the notion of a Talmid Chaver, a Talmud who at some point becomes a colleague. To the best of my recollection, the notion of a Chaver Talmid, of a colleague who becomes a Talmid, so that is not something that the halacha discusses. But I think that in a way, really encapsulates the way that I view my relationship with Rabbi Ebner. I met him 33 years ago when I started teaching at Hamiftar. In fact, he was the only member of the faculty at the time who I did not know either personally. So, for example, Rav Schrader was someone who I had known, or he had known me from when I was in 5th grade going on. I wasn't that much older, I was 28. Or by reputation, with Bravender, in any event, he was the only one who I didn't know personally or by reputation. And even though he was and remained 20 years my senior, he treated me as a colleague, l'chol inyan v'davar. But our interactions at first, because of the scheduling, were relatively limited. Our teaching schedules were more or less the same, so we were in shiurim at the same time, talking to our talmidim at the same time. Even at the mythological lunch table of yeshiva, the faculty of yeshiva and Mishkar. So those first years, so I didn't really eat lunch at the yeshiva that often because my Louisa was working, and so I had to in Yerushalayim, and it was a 7-minute walk from my house to the yeshiva. So I would run down, pick up the kids from Gan, get them fed, settled. Louisa would come, and then I would be back for the afternoon seder, when also he was teaching. So I didn't have that much to do with him per se. So we slowly started to get to know one another. There was a point for me personally, in Shvat of that year. So our third child was born, Baruchi. And so at the bris, this was a, if you will, a moment. So I didn't have a lot of kibbudim to give out, per se. So my father-in-law, Zichron Levracha, was the sandak, and Rav Lichtenstein had come in from the Dush, and he read the name. And I think my brother was Kiseh Shel Eliyahu. And Rav Lichtenstein looked at me and said, "Don't you have anyone at kibbudim?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "But David Ebner is here, right? Aren't you going to have him hold the baby when when he's being named?" And then something the Nafala Simon is they used to say in this country, and it was something. What's happening? Something was very different. And then from that point on, I started, paying a lot more attention to that I had a great deal and realized that I had a great deal to learn from this friendly, avuncular colleague of mine. So as a result, and I'll mention the story in a moment, but in the interim, 11 years later, when Benny and I decided to make a go and try to found the yeshiva, which still didn't have a name. The name, by the way, was Rabbi Ebner's idea. So we were talking, and we created a rough outline of what we, more than a rough outline of what we wanted to accomplish. And when we decided in the summer of 2003 that we were going to make a go for it, a good fortune, as it were, fell into our lap. Rabbi Ebner had recently decided to leave Or Torah Stone and Hamiftar, and for a while he was with Shraga, the first year of Shraga, and he wasn't associated with any yeshiva at that point. And I remember telling Rabbeinu that, to my mind, the most gifted mechanech that I had ever met, either as a student or as a colleague, was possibly on the market, and we should try to snap him up as Rosh Yeshiva and Mashgiach Ruchani. He agreed on one condition, that he would remain Rosh Yeshiva, but I would be Rosh HaYeshiva. Now, I don't know what that meant. I didn't know what that meant, but it really meant that a lot of the administrative stuff fell out. But in terms of the kavod, right, that he was, giving me, and he was insistent on it. And anything that, any publication of the yeshiva, if it listed him as Rosh HaYeshiva, he would edit it, and he would always introduce me as Rosh HaYeshiva, etc. He would, from my perspective, the chaver I had become the talmid. He, on the other hand, always continued to see myself as a chaver and as a partner. And there's a lot that I can say about that partnership, but as Rishon Bar Yochai said of Elisha, I learned much, as maybe more, from our daily interaction, that Yitzikat Mayim Al Yadav, than I did from the hundreds and thousands of Sichot and Shurim that I heard from him over the years. So I just want to give two short vignettes. So I don't want to get Rabbi Berman upset by going over time.
Okay, we're having sound problems.
Okay. So I hope that there's closed captions for the audience out there. Anyway, we shared an office in the old building at Yossi Ben Yoetzer. And for those people who learned there, so you remember that it was a bit of a makeshift office. The first year actually it served as the kitchen of the yeshiva, and then when the kitchen moved down to the basement, so we got an office. We shared the office, but it was only really large enough for one of us at a time. And so we put some personal items. Both of us put personal items into the office. He had in that office, and just what he put in really told me at least a great deal. He had a photo of two people who he saw, I think, as his, if you will, the Rebbeim Chaverim or Chaverim Rebbeim, I don't know which way. I'm not going to talk about them per se, but those people who know them, Rabbi Yosef Lenevsky, Zatzal, and Rabbi Dr. David Applebaum, his first cousin, Hashem Yikom Damo. But there was a third photo that he brought in, and it's almost an iconic photo. I've seen it elsewhere. It's a photo of the Rav, Rav Moshe Feinstein, and Rav Schneur Cutler at a resort in Lakewood, New Jersey. And they're sitting, and the Rav has his thumb like this, talking to, making a point to Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe is looking at him, and Rav Schneur Cutler is sitting there, looking right at the camera. And it's really a wonderful photo. But above them, standing behind them, is a clean-shaven individual. The person the photo must have been taken, I guess, in the 60s. And the person who I happen to recognize mentioned junior NCSY, so I recognized him because I had gone to Lakewood as a junior NCSY. He was the the long term, to the end, he ended up serving, I think, 6 decades as the Rav of the first Orthodox shul in Lakewood, New Jersey, Sons of Israel, with Pesach Levovitz. And he was for a while, he was also the president of the RCA. So he's a Chashuv Rav, a shul rabbi. But, still, it takes away from the picture, because the focus of the picture is just on, you're looking at the Rav and Rav Moshe and with Rav Shneur Cutler, looking at the camera, paying attention, and there's, another individual. And so I asked him once why he didn't crop out. It would have been very easy to crop out Rabbi Lovitch. I've seen the picture elsewhere with him cropped out. And so he said, I can't crop him out. Why not? Because he was the founder, he founded the day school that I went to when I was a kid. And without him, that Hakarat HaTov that he had, said, I can't cut him out because then I would be cutting something of myself out. Without him, I probably wouldn't have gone on to all of the different yeshivot that I went on to. And he had retained that Hakarat HaTov, going back now, because he had been in that school in the 1950s. So at that point, it was well over a Yovel, and that Hakarat HaTov had remained. So that was something that deep sense of understanding Hakarat HaTov was something that really was such an emblem of Rabbi Ebner Zatzal, all those who knew him, and really, even in something as almost as trivial as that, was something that was really part and parcel of it. There was an earlier story when I was still in Hamiftar, which also really also really impacted on me. I was the only person who saw this particular story. I may be the only person who knows why Rabbi David wasn't cut out of the photo. But it was in Yeshiva Miftar towards I think it was, we had already moved to the campus in Migdal Oz. And I walked in on Rabbi Ebner, I walked into the office, and Rabbi Ebner was standing, sort of like where I was standing now, and he was signing a piece of paper. And he was standing, but he was standing a good distance away as he signed it. And I didn't say anything, I just looked at him quizzically. He saw me and he said, I'm signing a letter of recommendation. I said, okay. He said, Dvar Sheker Tircha. Now, I learned three things from that particular incident. Okay? Number one was, of course, we all know, was his incredible sense of humor. But in addition, of course, was his real deep, his deeply felt sense of emet and of truth. You had to do, because remember, no one else was in the room when he was doing it. This was totally on his own. If I hadn't walked in, just because it was the office of the yeshiva, no one would have ever known. But he really felt it so deeply that he couldn't do it. And only many years later, because those two things I realized right away. Only many years later did I realize that, and this really served us so well, in many years of the yeshiva, 20 years that we were together, that that it's true, that he had that sense of emet, but he still signed the letter. In other words, he understood what needed to be done, and he did it. And there are many times that I can point to over the course of the years that you look at certain decisions that you have to make, difficult decisions, and there is that conflict between, sometimes it's emet and chesed, sometimes it's emet and shalom, and we need to make the call. And he, when he knew when to make that call, there was no one better at it than he was. Just an example of that was a little bit less than 20 years. It was the first year of the yeshiva, second year of yeshiva. When the prime minister at the time, Ariel Sharon, had his stroke, and Rabbi Ebner's immediate reaction, because he was at that point very much a controversial figure, especially in the religious world after the Hitnakut. And Rabbi Ebner said, we have to get a bus, we have to go to the Kotel and say Tehillim as a yeshiva. And because a Rosh Mimshalat Yisrael has fallen ill, and we're not going to daven. And we did, and he was surprised. I don't know if he really was surprised, but he voiced surprise that we were the only yeshiva there, that no one else had thought of coming. But that was his sense, an understanding that how emet and shalom have to serve one another and be synthesized together. So that really, things that I've learned from him over the years and have so impacted on the yeshiva. So I started with the Shimush Chachamim and the story of what he said about the Rav. What was interesting about that story was the first story, which I'm not going to tell now, was something that he had witnessed of Rav Soloveitch. The second story was something that he heard the Rav say about his time when he was a child or a young teenager in the home of Rav Chaim. And I'm going to, instead of saying over, as it were, what he said in that shir, I'm going to read it from his telling of it in one of his poems in the first volume, actually. So on the poem of his 120, so he has notes on the poem, and he mentions the story. He actually referenced the poem, not by name. It took me a little while to find it. But this is what he said. I recall the Rav once said to us, when we were young and thought that smartness meant only conceptual understanding, that although he could teach and we could follow the difficult Talmudic logic of the intricacies of the service of the day of Yom Kippur, it was something that he felt that he failed at, that he could not teach. And that was what it was to be a young boy, more than 40 years in the past, praying on Yom Kippur next to his grandfather, Rav Chaim and Chris, and hearing the sound of the angels as they came to Rav Chaim recite the order of the Avodah in the Musaf prayer. That he couldn't teach. Now, he continued in the Sikha to say that when people who had also been in the room when the Rav had said that story, said they'd seen the volume and they'd seen this, and they said the Rav never said anything about angels. And he was insistent that they had. So he asked other people, and no one remembered the angels. And he went to Dr. Tova Lichtenstein, the Rav's daughter, and asked her if she had heard the story and had heard her father mentioning the angels, and she said no, she had never heard the angels. But she said, that maybe you heard the angels, and that dovetailed so nicely with the continuing paragraph of what he said before he had spoken to Mrs. Lichtenstein. 40 years later, I finally understood his words. I understood that there are critical, important things that cannot be taught. They have no words, but the story can be told. The tale of the experience can be recounted, can be passed on to another generation. And the words must be said even if at the time they are but the silences of the whirling cape, because students deserve lessons that cannot be understood for 40 years, because they deserve teachers who understand this and continue to teach long after life and death have silenced them. And in this understanding, I am swept away. 40 years ago in New York, I heard the story. 40 years before that, it took place in Brisk. Now, 40 years from now, one of my students may hear angels. I don't know about 40 years from now. I know that 25 years after he wrote it. So we hear the angels that we've gained from hearing and have been mishamesh echacham.
You go back to Rwanda. You really came in away. You really came in away from this. So much traffic here. Is it just behind? I'm sure it goes to be like a 45-minute keynote heavy thing. I haven't, like 30 years ago. I haven't got a good share since.
It's very daunting, this prospect, but my only reservation is I don't get to hear from so many people that had so many experiences with Rabbi Ebner, which I'd much rather hear. But hopefully I can add something to this moment, which impacted me greatly from Rabbi Ebner. So just as an introduction, my name is Ben Gross. I was in the yeshiva. I see some more familiar faces. It's so nice. But I was in the yeshiva between 2006 and 2008, year 3 and year 4 of the yeshiva. In my second year of the yeshiva, I was zoche to sit directly in front of Rabbi Ebner. So for those of you that were in the previous building, it was the one next to the bimah. Directly in front of Rabbi Ebner, and I learned a lot more from, I won't say a lot more, I learned a lot from sitting in front of Rabbi Ebner, learning how to daven, learning how to learn, coming in early at the Bet Midrash at 6:30. When I didn't have a chavruta with Rabbi Ebner, I was fortunate to have a chavruta in Pachad Yitzchak, but when I didn't have a chavruta, I often came early to davening just so I could eavesdrop on others. Found out, but I don't think he was too upset. There are 3 points that I'd like to expound upon which impacted me greatly. The first one has been written twice by people in this room in different contexts, but I believe I was the first one to write it. So this is my notebook I had from yeshiva. I had the foresight then to make notes, to write divrei Torah and write quotes. A lot of the quotes were from Rabbi Ebner, and then I realized the whole book would be finished by the end of the first Zman if I wasn't extremely selective. But it's got some quotes from Rabbi Ebner and some stories. My kids got hold of it as well, unfortunately, but it's still there. So 17th of September 2006. Last night, first night of Slichot. Rabbi Ebner, in the middle of Slichot, goes round to all the windows and shuts them for no apparent reason. The next morning he explains the importance of Ben Adam L'Chavero and explains that there is no point of doing Slichot if you're going to wake people up with it. The yeshiva at the time was next to residential buildings. It was one of those moments that prior to Slichot, all we're thinking about is Hashem, all we're thinking about is our connection with Hashem, forgiveness, and suddenly my world was kind of ripped apart by Rabbi Ebner saying, wait a second, it's not all about you. And to continue that story, 16th of February 2007, at the home of Rabbi Sylvester, I told the above story, and he was moved because of his defining moment with Rabbi Ebner, if you allow me to say it, of the beautiful singing which woke him up, and with the same message. So for me, that was story number one. And the fact that, and again, what Rabbi Sussman has been saying, it's a lot of comfort to me that the things that have impacted me so much has also been the messages and the teachings that have impacted others so much, and not just in my time in Eretz Yisrael, but from prior times as well, from Yeshivat HaMivtar and other times as well. The second thing, which has already been mentioned, but I'll add to it in my own way, is Rav Ebner's humility. And the Chadarocha Rav Ebner never cut in line. Many people tried to get him to let him go first, let him take meals before us. Never. We always stand at the back, wait patiently, and wait for his turn. And the other anecdote is that Rav Ebner had a very unpopular YouTube channel. He was a content creator, but he didn't care about subscribers, likes, or clicks. At the end of the share, I'd message Rav Ebner saying, thank you very much for the share. You weren't just speaking into the ether. I gained a lot. And Rav Ebner would always reply saying, with either the Makorot, either an extra something to it which he thought he missed out, but he wanted to also add. And for Rav Ebner, there's always an opportunity to learn more, and to learn deeper, and to learn more thoroughly. Another quick anecdote is that when I was in university, when Rav Berman invited me to speak, I would look through a lot of my previous emails and correspondence with Rav Ebner. One of my questions to Rav Ebner in university was, I had a Christian evangelical friend who gave me a New Testament as a present for my birthday. I asked Rav Ebner, can I keep it? He said, the short answer was yes, I can keep it. I might want to put it on, there's no question of Geniza. I might want to put it somewhere in recycling or something like that. But if it piques my fancy, I can keep it. There's no problem with it. But just so that this present does result in Torah being given and Torah being learnt, I attach my recording on Parashat Chayesar, which I've just done. There's always an opportunity to learn more and to learn deeper. I want to thank, number one, Rav Berman, all the faculty that are here that I learned with. Rav Ebner obviously had a huge impact on me, wherever I've gone. I wrote 4 pages down, and I was given the good advice, keep it short and keep it sweet. I'm looking forward to hearing everyone else. But a huge hakarat tov to Rav Ebner, to Mrs. Ebner, and to the faculty. And may his memory be a blessing for all of us and continue to inspire us. Amen.
I feel embarrassed that I'm speaking from my phone. In my head, I should have like an awkwardly. How do I come? I feel like I should have like an awkwardly photocopied piece of paper, but okay. I'll introduce myself. Also, my name is Noam Steinman. I was in the yeshiva in 2010, which I believe was year 7. I'm going to give a little bit of background on myself because it's a little bit important to what I want to say. So I come from a place called Ottawa in Canada. It's like a little town, and there wasn't so much real Jewish upbringing in this place. There was some, but I had made this decision against my parents' will to go to Israel to yeshiva. My parents have since accepted it, thank God. But I'm from such a weird place that the yeshiva couldn't come interview me in this Ottawa, and I had to travel to Montreal, which is like a 2-hour drive, to meet Rabbi Tabori in the school. I probably don't even remember. It's fine. And I was all nervous, right? Because I'm like this kid from this weird place, and not really sure what like we had a rabbi in our shul, but like that was like I didn't know what a yeshiva was or like how to talk to a rabbi from a yeshiva. I remember people telling me like, no, you're like, we didn't call it then, but I was like the DEI guy, right? I was like, oh, like we can dilute our American population by getting the guy from Ottawa. So like, I was like guaranteed entry, okay? Which I still believe is the reason why you let me in, but that's fine. Why am I telling you all this? It's because I arrive in the yeshiva, and like I've been to Israel a few times, and I come from a very Zionist family. You're getting a phone call, Rabbi. on your phone and on your watch. It's okay. Sorry. The audio's working now? Great. Fantastic. I'm the first person people are hearing. Okay. Anyway. So I show up in this yeshiva and in the Yossi Ben Yoezer building, and I'm like, basically like a lost puppy. Like I don't really know where I am. I'm like, what I'm supposed to do. And the first thing you do, I assume still, is you meet with like the rabbi they think is like roughly your knowledge level, that they can test you to put you in a shir. And so they put me in Rabbi Ebner's. Rabbi Ebner interviewed me for what shir I should be in. Big hakarat hatov to my high school rabbi, Rabbi Howard Finkelstein, back in Ottawa, who his son is a year older than me. So after his son went to YU, I became his student chavruta that I had to learn with every day, and so he taught me how to learn, which is a lot of hakarat hatov. And so Rabbi Ebner, who in those years I assume for a long time taught the kids from Ottawa who didn't know much, so he ended up asking, like, why do you know how to read? And we were talking, and he shared for me, I think then, if not a little bit later, that he originally was from a place called Calgary, Alberta in Canada. And for me, I'm telling you, my first day, that was like an anchor. Like, oh, here are all these rabbis in Israel who, like, I presume were all American originally, or I don't know if there were any British rabbis at the time, but for me, that was like an anchor. Like, oh, this seemingly elderly man, who I guess wasn't that old, but as an 18-year-old felt very old, and he had this white not really, he had white hair, and he was like a rabbi, and he's like, oh, he's like a kid from Calgary, and I was a kid from Ottawa, which is like almost the same thing. For probably nobody in this room understands what I'm talking about, but that's okay. And for me, that was like an anchor, and I thought about that at his levaya when. And also in a similar way here, where there were people from seemingly every generation and every age were at that levaya in basically equal proportion. That there were people who had known Rabbi Ebner for decades and people who had known Rabbi Ebner for not as long, and had known him at different stages of life. And my father, thank God, was I mean, he also came with me to the funeral, and he remarked afterwards, and it was very true, that everybody walked out of that funeral with the same face. We were all remembering the things that Rabbi Ebner had taught us, and we were all thinking about, I imagine that I'm probably the only person he ever told he was from Calgary as a reason to make me feel comfortable. But for everybody who was at that funeral, and everybody who knew him had like some connection to him, beyond just a rabbi who knew how to teach Torah, which, I mean, he was very good at, but he was very good, and he was very intentional, it seemed like, to give us that sort of personal connection to which we could anchor our relationship to him and therefore to Torah. So I wanted to mention that. I want to tell like one more sort of long story, and then I'll wrap up. I don't have my timer. So Rabbi Ebner was as Rabbi Sussman mentioned, I knew that he was a great rabbi when my children were born, and Rabbi Ebner we gave him the kavod at both of our sons' brises to announce the name, say that paragraph where in the middle the reason why everyone comes to the bris, to hear the name. And so when my first son was born, we named him Moshe Eliezer. And when Rabbi Ebner, I want to thank Michael Rainsbury, who's here, for somehow having a video of this. But until he sent this video to me a few weeks ago, I had this engraved in my brain that so if you've never been to a bris, what happens is the rabbi reads the paragraph and then pauses, and then the dad whispers the name, and then the rabbi reads it out loud. Okay. So when I whispered Moshe Eliezer to Rabbi Ebner, he paused. He choked up. He wept a little bit, and then he sort of choked out the name in a very he seemed very, very emotional, and the video evidence proves that it's not just in my mind. And so why was he emotional? To my understanding, is that my grandfather Moshe, for which I named my son, was a Holocaust survivor, and my mother donates a day of learning in the yeshiva every year for Lilu Nishmato on his yortzeit. And for many years, Rabbi Ebner would always, like, after Shacharit that day, would sort of speak for a few minutes about my grandfather, and that was very. And then Mrs. Ebner would send it to the whole family, and we would all listen to this audio, and it was very, very nice. And so I'm sitting there at my son's bris. For me, it's emotional. It's my first kid. It's his bris, and I'm naming him after this grandfather of mine, and that's, for me, very emotional. And I see Rabbi Ebner is also very emotional. So at the Shiva, I was actually speaking to Rabbi Ebner's son, Noam. His other son is named Moshe. And my name is Noam, if you didn't remember. And it's fine. And so I was speaking to his son, Noam, and I shared this story with him. And he said, I want to tell you something. I said, what is that? He says, Rabbi Ebner's father's name was Eliezer, and his grandfather's name was Moshe. And you named your son Moshe Eliezer. And then apparently Rabbi Ebner is the only one in the chain whose name isn't Moshe or Eliezer. It's like Moshe, Eliezer, Rabbi Ebner, and then Moshe, and then Eliezer. Like, it keeps going. And he shared a story about Rabbi Ebner's grandfather, Moshe, and why Rabbi Ebner named his son Moshe, as I had done. And Noam Ebner said to me, he said, I guarantee for you that at your bris, when you named your son, he was emotional, also for you, but also he was thinking about his family. And he was thinking about his grandfather Moshe, and he was thinking about his father Eliezer, and his son Moshe, and his grandson Eliezer. And that's a big reason why he was emotional. And then Noam Ebner says to me, and I'll tell you why he never told you that story. Because Rabbi Ebner wanted you to feel that he was focusing only on you at your son's bris. And he would never want to take his, what was meaningful to him and cloud what he was doing for you. I share that story to sort of point out that Rabbi Ebner was focusing on both these stories. He was focusing on what I needed, and I imagine what many of us here needed, or wanted to hear as students, and that he never made it about himself, and then he always focused on what was important and what was needed for us. Rabbi Benny, one more thing. I wrote down, I'm telling you, not 4 pages. I wrote down 3 things, but like each of them is long. So, I can't help but remember a small teaching we learned from Rabbi Ebner, which I want to share, which is when I was in the yeshiva was when the awful pigua when the Fogel family was killed. And Rabbi Ebner and the yeshiva took us to the Levaya. And I remember, is it before or afterwards, Rabbi Ebner gave the sicha where he taught us that when we say the paragraph in Shmona Esrei, V'ishei Yisrael utfilatam tekabel beratzon, what are the Ishei Yisrael? What are the sacrifices of the Jewish people which we hope that God accepts beratzon? And he said these are the for 2,000 years we didn't have korbanot, but we had Ishei Yisrael, that we had people who we sacrificed. And so it would be the past 2 years, which are Be'ezrat Hashem ending tonight. This is a teaching that has come up for me over and over and over again over the past 2 years, unfortunately. And I just want to thank. I think it's an example. I want to thank Rabbi Sussman, who also my Rosh Hayeshiva, and the faculty here, half of whom now are like my friends and neighbors in Modi'in, but not the faculty who were here and who taught me ostensibly for 10 months, but never stopped teaching me, and B'ezrat Hashem will never stop teaching me. So thank you very much.
Chatayim Askera, yeah, two Chatayim. The sound is working. Thank you. It's a good thing we hired new faculty because Rabbi Raymond helped us get it going. And I made one mistake. I sent an email to the wrong email address. So we're going to have another speaker very briefly, Ilan Regenbaum, who I believe wanted to speak, and I sent to the wrong email address. So he's going to speak really briefly, and then we'll get to the main speaker.
Thank you. I will be very, very fast. I will try not to cry. I had the zchut of learning with Rabbi Ebner every week for many, many years. I'm regretting speaking. The one thing I do want to say is my first day in yeshiva, Rabbi Ebner got up and snapped. That was 15 years ago. My apologies, this was meant to be fast. And that feels like yesterday. Just as Rabbi Ebner got sick, I wanted to buy him a gift to bring to one of our chavrutas, just to show him I'm thinking of him. And so I'm looking for, we learn Sfas Emes every week, and I tried to find some Hasidus poetry. I just thought it would be an interesting mix of our worlds. I couldn't find too many English Hasidic poetry anywhere, but I did come across a recent translation of poetry by Rav Shlomo Ibn Gviro, and I thought it was Kabbalistic. It worked, and so I was going to give it to him, but he passed away before I could embody what Rabbi Ebner, one of the many things. I read what I wrote in the back of the book. I'd like to give it to the yeshiva. Hopefully there's room on the bookshelf. But time flies, and appreciate every second. So thank you.
The students in the yeshiva already heard my relationship with Rabbi Ebner, which at this point in time I think is 39 years long. From that time I heard that first Elul Shir. But I want to introduce. I know we those in the yeshiva know that Rabbi Ebner had a minhag that he would always say that an introduction should be reversely proportionate to the importance of the person. And while that might be true, sometimes the people in the audience don't always know the person. So I had the privilege of, it's odd to introduce one of the people who's had one of the greatest impacts on my life besides Rabbi Ebner and so many other people. Rabbi Menachem Schrader was a Ram in Yeshivat HaMivtar for many years with Rabbi Ebner. He was responsible for creating JLIC, which those guys in Yeshiva know that I was a participant in for a number of years as a rabbi at Brandeis. Talmud Chacham par excellence. And I have to say, again, I'll make it brief. Any Gemara that I ever teach is all indebted to Rabbi Schrader. And if I go on further, it will be unfair. So I want to introduce, we're going to hand out Makrot sheets. If you haven't got them, did you get them yet? We'll distribute the Makrot sheets right now. And Rabbi Schrader will give a shir on Kavanah in Hilchot Sukkah.
I want to thank Rav Sussman for this opportunity, and Rav Berman and whoever else might have been involved in the decision to allow me to give the shir on this occasion. I see many faces. We'll keep to the topic. The topic is kavana in the mitzvah of sukkah. And I'm going to try to explain the problem in this matter. Let's read the opening source, which are the psukim in Chumash Vayikra. Basukot teshvu shivat yamim, kol hezrach b'Yisrael yeshvu basukot, l'man yedu dorotechem ki basukot hoshavti et bnei Yisrael, v'hotzii otam me'eretz Mitzrayim, ani Hashem Elokechem. It's not necessary for this group to translate. I'm going to do that anyways out of the bad habit I have of when I give shiurim in English. I always do that. So I'm going to do it now also. You shall sit in Sukkot for 7 days. All citizens of Israel shall sit in Sukkot, meaning on Sukkot, in order that your generations will know that I had the Jewish people sitting in Sukkot, the Bnei Yisrael sitting in Sukkot, when I took them out of the land of Egypt. I am Hashem, your God. There are 613 mitzvot in the Torah. 248 of them are positive commandments. Many of those positive commandments are ben adam l'chaveiro, and are understood without need to explain them. I don't recall any mitzvot aseh that are chukim, except in the sense of that para aduma is a chok. But by and large, positive commandments are understood. And the mitzvah of Sukkot is understood as well, in case we weren't sure. The Torah explains it to us, in order that your generations know that you sat in Sukkot coming out of Mitzrayim. There is a machloket between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer in different midrashim. The two opinions are attributed to one or the other, not always to the same person. Whether the Sukkot are literally Sukkot, huts, more or less what we make and sit in, or whether the Sukkot are Ananei HaKavod, Hashem's protection of the Jewish people in the most explicit way. Even if the Sukkot are huts, they're also a protection from the scorching sun of Egypt and the desert, and from whatever else. But certainly the notion of Ananei Kavod is a much grander notion of protection. Question: to what extent is the understanding of the reason for the mitzvah of Sukkot necessary in order to fulfill the mitzvah? Is that question clear? In other words, let's say a person just sits in the sukkah and has no idea whatsoever that the reason for sitting in the sukkah is ki basukot hoshafti et bnei Yisrael v'hotzi otam me'eretz Mitzrayim. Is the mitzvah fulfilled or not? Now, let's just clarify that there is something which is coming to many of your heads right now, which is not the topic. And that is the question of mitzvot srichot kavanah or mitzvot einan srichot kavanah. Do mitzvot require intention to fulfill the mitzvah? or do you fulfill a mitzvah by performing it even without intending to fulfill the mitzvah? You would say, well, the question I raised should depend on that, right? Everyone holding with me still? Some people. That is not what we're talking about. The question of whether mitzvot tzrichot kavanah is a question of when you are performing a mitzvah. Is it required to have intention to be yotzei the mitzvah when you're performing the mitzvah? Or no, if you perform the mitzvah, even if you have no intention to be yotzei the mitzvah, the simple fact that you performed it, you're yotzei. That is the question of whether mitzvot tzrichot kavanah or mitzvot einan tzrichot kavanah. Simple example, which may be a poor example because it's a question of eating, which is more complicated. But someone gets invited to a Seder, and at the Seder, they eat matzah. And no one explains to them, a Jewish person, that eating matzah the night of the Seder is a mitzvah. But it is. If a person knows it's a mitzvah, then they're certainly yotzei the mitzvah. What if the person is not aware that eating matzah on the night of the Seder is a mitzvah? But they did? Did they fulfill the mitzvah or did they not? That question should be dependent on whether mitzvot tzrichot kavanah or mitzvot einan tzrichot kavanah. But you may remember that the Haggadah itself talks about a different kavanah for matzah, right? Matzah zu shanu achlim al shumma. And the answer is because with Bnei Yisrael, when they came out of Mitzrayim, they had to go out so quickly that their bread couldn't rise, and they ended up eating matzah. Now, without going into too many details on that point, that is why it is a mitzvah. There too, one can ask, well, if you're told eat matzah, why? It's a mitzvah. Oh, okay. Then you have kavanah to be yotzei the mitzvah, but if you don't know what the mitzvah is all about, is the reasoning behind the mitzvah also a requisite in order to fulfill the mitzvah or not? Which is a very important question, which is worthy of a Shabbos Hagadol drasha, but it's not Shabbos Hagadol. So we're not going to talk about that, even though it's actually a very related question to what we're about to talk about for real. In other words, in this case, the Torah tells us why we're supposed to perform the mitzvah of Sukkot. And the reason is, Uman yedu dorotechem, ki basukot hoshavti b'nei Yisrael b'otzi otam me'eretz Mitzrayim. What if you go into the sukkah and you eat and you fulfill it and you're there for 7 days and you sleep there and you don't leave the sukkah for 7 days, but you don't know, did you fulfill the mitzvah or didn't you fulfill the mitzvah? Question clear. And this is not the question of mitzvot tzrichot kavanah as I explained a moment ago. Okay. Now, we're going to see that the Gadol Hadoros that dealt with this question first and foremost explicitly was the Bach. The Bach is a perush on the Tur Shulchan Aruch. What brought the Bach to talk about it is the following line in the Tur. Please look at Bet on the pages that were handed out. V'asukot she'omer hakotuv she'oshivu behem heim ananei kvodo she'hekifanu behem v'val yakeh otanu shrav v'shemesh. The Tur tells us that the Sukkot that we're supposed to remember, or the Sukkot that it doesn't, I gave away the punchline, right? The Sukkot that God protected us in when we exited Mitzrayim were the Ananei Kavod. That's what protected us from sun and dryness. Now, this is highly uncharacteristic of the tour to start getting into Ta'amei HaMitzvot. The tour is basically the backdrop of the Shulchan Aruch itself. The Shulchan Aruch was meant to be a kitzur of the tour and the Beit Yosef. And the tour was, practically speaking, the first Shulchan Aruch, right? Tour didn't talk about things that were not practical, only things that were practical. That's how he distinguished himself from the Rambam. And one would expect all the details of Hilchot Sukkot in Hilchot Sukkot of the tour, but not an explanation. Were they Ananei Kavod? Were they real Sukkot? Why is he talking about that? Question clear? Good. Now we're going to read the Bach, which is Ot Gimel on this page. Bach Tibura Matchil B'Sukkot, there. B'Sukkot Teshvu V'Gomer, Tala Katuv V'Gomer. It is striking that the word Tala Katuv seems to appear in the Bach, but not in the tour itself. It seems to be quoting it, but we're going to ignore that and we continue. The Bach. Ika L'Meidat B'Divrei Rabbeinu. One can be medayek in the words of Rabbeinu, meaning the tour. She'ein zeh midarko b'chiburo zeh l'va'er hakavana l'shum mikra shebat Torah. It's not his way to explain anything. Reasons. Ki lo ba rak lifsok hora'ah. The tour only comes to tell us what to do. O lahorot minhag, or to teach us minhagim. Upo ha'erich l'va'er v'lidrosh hamikra de b'Sukkot teshvu. Question of the Bach. Question clear? It's a question we asked a moment ago. Right? Good. Now we're going to get the Bach's answer. V'yireh li lomar bazeh shesover, the tour thinks, dechevan dichtiv v'man yedu dorotechem v'chulon, in order that your generations know, lo kiyem ha-mitzvah ketikuna im lo yeda kavanat mitzvah tasukah kefi pashta. One does not fulfill the mitzvah properly. Get that word, because it's going to be an issue as we continue. Lo kiyem ha-mitzvah ketikuna, one does not fulfill the mitzvah properly if he does not know the intention of the mitzvah of sukkah, simply understood. Now, it could be some of you have learned Masechet Sukkah or have started learning Masechet Sukkah. And on the first daf of the Masechet, the pasuk, L'man yedu dorotechem ki b'Sukkot hoshafti b'nei Yisrael b'otzi otam mi'eretz Mitzrayim, is used and understood for all sorts of drashot. And it doesn't mention the simple meaning of the pasuk. You know why he doesn't mention it? Because we don't need the Gemara to teach us the simple meaning of the pasuk. We know what the simple meaning of the pasuk is. And the Bach is, you'll excuse the term, being mechadesh, that the simple meaning of the pasuk is necessary for the proper fulfillment of the mitzvah, regardless of all the drashos and daf bet in Masechet Sukkah. Again, shesover dekevan dichtiv l'man yedu lo kiyem ha-mitzvah ketikuna im lo yeda kavanat mitzvah tasukah kefi pashta. V'lachein, therefore, bi'er lefi hapshat di'ikar ha-kavana b'yeshivat tasukah sheyizkar yitziat Mitzrayim. Now, the phrase "sheyizkar yitziat Mitzrayim" has caused the Mefarshim on the Bach a lot of difficulty. But I'm going to explain it as I think he clearly means, you should remember what happened during Yetziat Mitzrayim, that Hashem protected us with the Ananei HaKavod. That's why the Torah feels it's necessary to state that we were protected through the Ananei HaKavod from all sorts of dangers, the sun, rain, whatever else we might have been protected from. And that is the notion of Aman Yedu Dorotechem. If you don't know this, you don't properly fulfill the mitzvah of Sukkah. How about that? Notice the word at the end of the first line here. Im lo yeda kavanat mitzvah tasukah kefi pshata. The intention of the mitzvah. If you don't know what the mitzvah is all about, you're not yotzei the mitzvah kitikuna. Now let's keep reading the Bach. V'zeh hatam ba'atzmo l'Rabbeinu Zal. Oh, excuse me. We're going further. What's his point? The question of whether the Sukkot were Ananei HaKavod or huts is not an interesting historical question, according to the Bach's understanding of the Torah. It is a halacha l'maisa question. What are you supposed to remember? What are you supposed to be knowing when you're sitting in the Sukkah? Are you supposed to be knowing that Hashem protected us in huts, in Sukkot? Or are we supposed to be knowing that Hashem protected us with Ananei HaKavod? Because one or the other is the proper interpretation of the Man Yedu Dorotechem Ki Basukot of Shafti B'nei Yisrael. What are you supposed to be thinking about? What are you supposed to be aware of? What is that yidiyah that you're supposed to be having? Which one? One or the other. To perform the mitzvah, to have that yidiyah, requires knowing the answer to the Torah's question. And the Torah gives us halacha l'maisa, his answer. Psak of the Torah. What are Sukkot? Ananei HaKavod. Clear? That's why the Bach says, the Torah explains that we lived in Ananei HaKavod, because that is supposed to be what we're supposed to be remembering. Okay. Now the Bach moves on. I know I spoke enough already, and that what I just said will require a lot of thought for many of you, maybe all of you, for the next 18 or so hours that we're still living in the sukkah. But the Bach doesn't stop here. He continues. V'zeh hatam ba'atzmo l'Rabbeinu Zal, meaning the Torah b'ma shekatav b'ilchot tzitzit b'siman chet. Quote from the Torah there. V'yichavein b'tatvo shetzivanu hamakom man tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai. Tzitzit is supposed to remind us of all the mitzvot. And notice the word laman, yedu. Tedu. If the tzitzit don't remind us of all the mitzvot, did we fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzit? Yes or no? Well, the Bach is saying, you're not yotzei ketikuna. You're not fulfilling it properly. If the tzitzit is not reminding you to keep all the mitzvot. V'chein. I'm reading the fourth line now. Bilchot tefillin siman kafei. The Torah quotes these things, right? V'yichavein, again, another quote from the Torah. V'yichavein ba'anachatam shetzivanu hamakom l'haniach l'man tiyeh Torat Hashem b'ficha. Another pasuk. Tefillin is supposed to remind us that Torah Hashem should be in our mouths. If it doesn't do the job, then the laman of the Torah is not being fulfilled, and the mitzvah is not being fulfilled properly if the laman does not come about. Sukkah, tzitzit, tefillin, each one with their own verse laman. Each one, if you don't get that laman into your heads, you have not fulfilled the mitzvah kitikuna. That's the lashon of the Bach. Continues the Bach, Mashalo Sakein Bishar Alachot. Ki lo katav sheyichavein shum kavana ba'asiyat hamitzvah. B'pnei ki hamakayem hamitzvah kidina yotzei ba'af al pi shelo hayta lo shum kavana. In all other mitzvot, if you don't have the kavanah, even if the kavanah is a particular kavanah of the mitzvah, you're yotzei. You did it. You're yotzei. You fulfill it. Aval b'tzitzit shekatuv be'en l'man tizkeru v'chen b'tfilin katuv l'man tiyeh Torat Hashem b'ficha. And in Sukkah, of course, look where it says l'man yedu dorotechem shepshuto hu she'atfilim hem ot v'zikaron kedei sheyeh Torat Hashem shagur b'finu. Ki biyad chazaka tziyach yireh shelo kiyem hamitzvah kitikuna im lo yichavein ota hakavana v'lachein katav balachot elu v'yichavein. Does this sound like an important Bach? Now I will just add one point. It could be my own lacking. I am unaware of any of the Mefarshim that dared disagree with this Bach. Couldn't find it. No. We hold these mitzvahs, even though it says a man, it's like everything else. Couldn't find anyone who said that from the Bach on, or before for that matter. And now the next paragraph in the Bach, it's a two-liner. V'chein gabei sukkah shekatuv l'man yedu mashma legamkin shetzarich sheyichavein b'shat yeshivat hasukkah hatam hamechuvan b'mitzvah, which is l'man yedu dorotechem ki basukot hoshavti et b'nei Yisrael. So you got to know what the sukkot are in order to fulfill the mitzvah. So therefore, the first siman in Tur Shulchan Aruch Hilchot Sukkah is Basukot Teshuv Shivat Yamim Kol Azrach Mitzvah Teshuv Basukot Man Yidu. Excuse me, I'm just reading the passage. Basukot Sheomer HaKatuv Sheshivanu Bahem Heim Ananei Kavod Shekifanu Bahem Val Yakeh Otanu Shrav Vashemesh. Okay, that's the tour, and that's the Bach on the tour. Question: what does it mean? Shelo yikayem et hamitzvah kitikuna. What does it mean, kitikuna? So we're going to read the Pri Megadim, who is quoting the Levush. I'm sorry, I'm not quoting the Levush. I don't have a Levush at home. Maybe you have one in your Sifriya. You can look it up there. It's there. Dalet, Pri Megadim, Eshel Avraham, Orachayim Tafresh Kaf Hey. On that tour. Shelatzeit hamitzvah ketikuna tzarich lekavein gam et zeh. To fulfill the mitzvah properly, you must have this kavanah. Hadieved yatsa kol shekivein latzeit levad. Parentheses ateret zahav. That's the levush. So the Pri Megadim is very explicit in quoting the Levush, saying, yes, you should have this kavanah, and it would appear that having this kavanah is part of the kiyum of the mitzvah minat Torah. It's doraita. Nevertheless, if you don't, the eved yatsa kol shekivein latzed. You had intention to be yotzei, you're yotzei. You're not yotzei as a result of not having that kavanah. I will give you now 5 seconds to think for yourself whether you identify with what the Pri Megadim says or not. Okay, but he did say it. Now we're going to learn the Bikurei Yaakov on this point. The Bach, you should know, was a Talmud of the Ramah and the Maharshal. He was when the Gdolei HaTalmidim of the Gdolei of the early Achronim of Chachmei Ashkenaz. And the Levush. The Bikurei Yaakov is more widely known as the Aruch Liner, who wrote a perush on, we have him on 7 Mesechtos. On the 7 Mesechtos we have him. He is very widely learned. One of them is Sukkah. And in the back of his perush on Maseches Sukkah, he has a perush on Shulchan Aruch Hilchos Sukkah, which he calls the Bikurei Yaakov. His full name was Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger. And he could have gone to Yeshivat Eretz Tzvi, right? Because he, of all the Achronim, probably the only one, is known to have gone to college. Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger, yes. So we're going to read the Bikurei Yaakov on this point. And it's the final source on this sheet. B'fri Megadim katav, shekavanot elu einam rak lechatchila. It's interesting that he's quoting it from the Pri Megadim. I wonder if the Bikurei Yaakov also didn't have a levush. I'd find that strange, but it's not impossible. In any case, he's quoting it from the Pri Megadim. Avo b'di'eved yatsa b'shelo kivein rak latzeit. B'di'eved you're yotzei, even if the only kavanah you had was to be yotzei the mitzvah. The mitzvot tzrichot kavanah latzeit davka. Even to the extent that we hold, which many poskim do, mitzvot tzrichot kavanah, it means kavanah latzeit, as we explained earlier in the shir. He then goes on, and I cut to the chase over here. V'laniyut da'ati ein zu ra'aya. Dezeh dafka b'shar hamitzvot, shelo tzivta ha'torah kavanah pratit bahem. I see there's a printing mistake here. Aval b'sukkah, shehatzivui hakatuvhu, sheyichavein kein, may, from the pasuk, leman yedu dorotechem, kmo shekatav habach, yesh lomar da filu bidi eved lo yatsa. The Torah says point blank, leman yedu dorotechem. Who says that the man yedu dorotechem is only lechatchila, not b'di'eved? It's me'akev. V'lachein imachal balayla rishona basuka below kavana zu yesh lahachmir le'echol shuv kezayit b'chavana. V'al kol panim yizaher kol achad l'lamed u'lesaper levanav u'levnei beito balayla harishona kavanat mitzvat sukkah. The Bikurei Yaakov, still in interpreting the Bach, says that, sorry, Pri Megadim can't accept it. B'di'eved, if you're not the man yedu dorotechem ki basukot shabti b'nei Yisrael, you are not yotzei the mitzvah. And therefore, make sure, in particular on the first night, when we eat the kizayit in the sukkah, like the kazayit of matzah, the Leil HaSeder, that it's mamash a chiyuv. The chiyuv must include with it an understanding of what it's all about. Because without it, this is what the pasuk means. If you don't have that understanding, you don't perform the mitzvah of sukkah. Now, you should know, so I shouldn't be hiding anything, that the Mishnah Brura is aware of this machloket between the Bikurei Yaakov and the Pri Megadim, and he says that most of the Achronim hold like the Pri Megadim. But the Bikurei Yaakov says what he said. And no one questions the fact that the idea that's being expressed here is certainly required minat Torah lechatchila. The question is whether you yotze bichlal without it or not. The Bikurei Yaakov says you're not. I taught with Rabbi Ebner in the yeshiva for 20 years together. I believe he had Talmidim that I didn't have, but every one of my Talmidim learned by him as well. I would be interested in hearing what he would have had to say about this machloket between the Bikurei Yaakov and the Pri Megadim, but I don't know. Thank you very much for listening and for learning with me this issue, which I think requires a great deal of thought. And even this last day of Sukkot is worthy of this thought.
Thank you, Rabbi Shrader. Since Baruch Hashem, the sound is working, despite the fact that the one person we cut out was the Rosh Yeshiva. But we'll make up for it somehow or other. I was told we'll have a private session. In any event, the last person, when the yeshiva was founded, I was not involved in the yeshiva's founding. I was asked, Rabbi Sussman approached me a few months before the yeshiva was founded on a Shabbat afternoon. I don't know if you recall, Mincha and Geffen Shul. But the people who founded the yeshiva, Rabbi Ebner, Rabbi Sussman, and of course Rav Benny. Rabbi Sussman and Rav Benny taught with Rabbi Ebner. I also was here from the beginning. Taught Rabbi Ebner for all these years. We asked to close out the evening for Rav Benny to give a few words.
To be the last one, it's always hard because you're taking the risk that thoughts that you have and you wrote are already being said by other people. But the Rosh HaYeshiva told me that I have to be the one that closing. So I will do the closing. And I want to start actually with a story that's not related to Rabbi Ebner somehow. That took place in my first year in Shlichut in Chicago 28 years ago. There was a fellow that was with us in Shlichut in Chicago when we established Kollel Torah Mitzion in Chicago that came with us to Shlichut with basically zero English. He knew yes and no, but he said them in the wrong place most of the time. So literally like that. And in the end of that year, there was a girl in the academy where the kollel was located. She was in the end of 9th grade, and she came to me and asked me, where is so-and-so? And I said, he's not here at the moment. She said to me, I have a gift for him for the end of the year. Can you give it to him? So I take it, and I give it to him. And he says, this girl asked me to give it to you. And he said, who is she? And I said, I don't know. She asked it, and there was a dedication in the front page. So I said, what it says over here? So I'm reading it and translate it for him with my broken English, but I understood it enough. And I said that she wrote, "Thank you for everything that you taught me. You taught me such a great deal. I'm a different person because of you." And he's looking at me and says, "I think she did a mistake. I never spoke with her in my life. I don't know who she is. Please, I don't want to embarrass her. If you can go to her and tell her that, I don't know her." So I go back to her and I said, "Listen, he says that he never spoke with you and he doesn't know you, so he couldn't have teaching you anything." And she said, "No, he taught me. It's true. He never spoke with me. He taught me a great deal." He says, "I'm coming from a Reform family. First day in Ida Crown, that is an Orthodox school. And I walked and I decided to myself, I'm too embarrassed to ask people what to do. So I will look into the men's section. I will find someone that look like he know what he's doing, and I will copy what he's doing." And right away, I saw how he's davening, and I realized that's the person that I want to learn from. And I was observing for a week, 2 weeks. I was observing what he was doing when he was doing Shema Yisrael. I heard the word, I understand what he did when he was standing for Shmona Esrei, etc., etc. And after that, I felt more comfortable already to ask questions because I wasn't totally a boor that didn't know anything. Now, when I came to the yeshiva and we started the yeshiva, I knew how to daven. And then I met Rabbi Ebner, and I realized that I don't know how to daven. And Dan Gross was mentioning it before, just to sit and look on Rabbi Ebner. I don't need to speak about his greatness in Torah. I don't need to speak about other aspects of his greatness, but just to look on him and to see how he davens, that impact me in such a way that I can say that I just looked, observed. I did spoke with him and learned with him a little bit about tefillah throughout the years, but most of what I got to my tefillah was just from looking on him and learning from looking on him. And I want to add just maybe a brief point that coming from a piece of Gemara that always strike me. A Gemara in Masechet Brachot in Daf Membet, in the bottom of Membet Amud Bet, and the Gemara telling us the story about the Chachamim that going with for the Levaya of Rav. And the Gemara says, Kinach nafshei de Rav, azlu talmidav batrei. So they went to the Levaya that took place in a different place, in a different town, and when they're coming back, they said to each other, Ki hadrei amrei nezol v'neichol lachma anahardan. Let's sit and eat in that and that place. And the discussion that they have after that, if the fact that they said we're going to sit, without that they said we're going to be massive, is that giving already considered to be as hasava, and therefore one can say the bracha for everyone, or that's not considered to be? And they're asking each other, and the Gemara says, Lo have beyadai. They didn't know the answer. And Kam Rav Ada bar Ahava, that was one of the Talmidim of Rav, and he did another kriya. He did another kriya because he said, Nach nafshei de Rav uvirkat mazon alo gamrina. Rav passed away, and even the halachot of Birkat HaMazon we don't know. Birkat HaMazon, we're saying every day. It's basic. All of us think that we know. Says Rav Ada bar Ahava, Rav is not here, and even that supposed to be so simple and we don't know. And I feel Rabbi Ebner is not here, and there's so many things that we don't know. I want to touch just literally a few aspects that other people maybe didn't experience. Rabbi Sassman was mentioning how we recruit Rabbi Ebner. I didn't know Rabbi Ebner. Rabbi Sassman told me, we have to get this rabbi. He's sitting at home and writing Chidushei Torah and poetry. So we met in his house, and I have a lot of friends working in other places, other institutions, other businesses. I don't know a lot of people that working closely as menahalim of institution for more than 20 years, that never have an argument. It's not that we always agreed, but the kavod that Rabbi Ebner brought, with the credit to Rabbi Sussman for me, as a student of Rabbi Sussman as well, the kavod that was always in the discussion about big things in yeshiva, about how to behave when there is a discipline issue that we need to deal with a certain talmid or with a parent. That's something that I never dreamed that I will experience such a relationship with such a kavod. I was a kid when we opened the yeshiva. Noam Steinman told me that he's 33, right? I was 32 when we started the yeshiva, okay? And I jumped straight to the director, executive director, whatever, of the yeshiva. And I had Rabbi Ebner and Rabbi Sussman holding my hand and helping me. And it was amazing to see two individuals that gaiva is just doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. They always give kavod to others. They're always giving you the space. And other people that spoke about how they felt, the Calgary story, I actually heard it and I knew that he's from Calgary, but that's exactly the point. He find to each individual that he spoke with something to show A, that he care, and B, that he understand, where he's coming from. It's amazing. And I felt the same. What I'm missing the most, if Ravad Bar Ava spoke about that they don't know how to bench, I'm missing the most the advice from Rabbi Ebner. I had the privilege. Last year wasn't already in the yeshiva, but the year before, he already decided that he's not coming. And with little physical pressure, I succeeded to convince his wife, Rabbi David Ebner, to put influence on him to agree to come in the mornings in the condition I promised him that I will pick him up every morning. And I had the zchut to pick him up 6:15 every morning and bring him here to the yeshiva. And that 15 minutes, by the way, except of days of rain, he didn't want me to pick him up from his home because he wanted to walk a little bit before. So I picked him up from Hadar Mall, whoever knows, in Talpiot. It's around 10-15 minutes walk from his home. And I will tell you why it's significant. It's not that the fact that he needed the walk for physical reason. That's true also. But Rabbi Ebner was learning while he was walking. And the reason that I'm telling you that is Ben Gross spoke about the fact that he sometimes came early to see Rabbi Ebner learning with other people. When the yeshiva wasn't here and Rabbi Ebner was coming by himself to the previous yeshiva, he was walking. So his first chavruta was 6:30 when davening was 7:30. But he was always there 6 o'clock because he told me once that he didn't say it in that way, but basically he says, before I'm learning with someone, before I'm teaching, I have to learn by myself. And all day I'm busy in teaching, basically. So he made sure that he have his own learning before. And that's something that I adapted, Baruch Hashem. And trying to do before my chavruta before davening is that I will have my own chavruta also before starting my day. And I will just touch one last point. Some of the people over here will understand what I'm talking about. But I think that I grew up with a father, Zichrono Livracha, that passed away more than 30 years ago. Was a Baal Tefillah and a Baal Koreh. And all the nusach that I knew and I know, I learned from him. And my father passed away before we started the yeshiva. And when we started the yeshiva, and we started to get ready for Yamim Noraim, so we basically split the tefillot between Rabbi Ebner and myself, more or less. And the voice that I hear in my head today when I'm davening, when I'm not the Shliach Tzibur, is a mix of my father and my second father that gave me a lot of advice in life. And my kids. And I think that the Sussman family kids feeling the same. That That's the voice of the Amim Huraim for all of us. Thank you.
What? If they would happen to record it, the first 30 minutes, that would be helpful. I had the privilege of having many chavrutot with Rabbi Ebner over the years. The last one that I had was in Likutei Moharan, Rabbi Nachman. I remember that Rabbi Ebner said that Rabbi Nachman used to teach complex Torahs, and when he realized that people didn't understand complex Torahs so well, he decided to teach stories. I think the one thing that we can walk away with a ton of Torah. I mean, I have years and years and years and years. We have tapes galore. If you haven't heard all those, some of those tapes I've heard literally 15, 20 times, maybe more. But we certainly have the stories, and I hope that tonight we got a chance to learn some deep Torah. I want to thank Rabbi Schrader, especially my Rabbi Schrader, for coming. I want to thank all the people who came. I want to thank all my colleagues in the yeshiva, all the students in the yeshiva, all the alumni in the yeshiva, and especially my dear friends from Hamiftar who also came. And we have those stories, and we can always take those stories for the rest of our lives. Thank you for coming.